Would you pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By any chance, do you think they might have gone over the other floor?
I can go check. That's a good idea, Bill. I didn't even think that. I think there's something else going on again.
Well, good morning all, and welcome to the September 23rd meeting of the Barnstable County Commissioners. If we have any public comment, now would be the time. I don't suppose we have any public comment this morning.
I don't have an agenda.
Oh, you don't have an agenda. Okay, well, the first item on our agenda, which is at 11, is a discussion of the Compassion Fund with Tom Ryan. But we've changed our location this morning. Normally we meet in rooms 11 and 12, and we're back in the other commissioners' meeting room, so we're checking to see if he's here. But while we're waiting, Sheila Lyons, I must say, is going to be a little late, probably about a half an hour. So we're going to begin the meeting and move along as we can, and hopefully she'll arrive before the end of the meeting. We might take a look at the commissioners' actions and see if we want to.
No, that's actually where Maggie's meeting is.
Maggie's meeting.
Yeah.
So we can do the commissioners' actions, items
Sure.
1 through 21.
Sure.
Okay, I don't see any problem, so I'll move them.
Okay, and I'll second them. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
I might mention something since we're in public comment. At one of the assembly meetings, Julie Taylor had said that she had gotten what she felt was a positive response from the fire service person that was that was at their committee meeting. So I followed up because I had a chance to talk to Chief Flynn in Harwich, and I was asking him about what his opinion was about the potential for regional service in the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, there's a grant that's going to, I think, Sheila Vanderhoff, for looking at dispatch issues on the Lower Cape. So he said that he had submitted several thoughts on the use of there is a Station 2 in Harwich that is strategically placed. If you take a look at the population center for Chatham, Brewster, and Harwich, it's in East Harwich, and it's set at a place that could respond to events in any one of those areas fairly easily. He had come up with a suggested plan for manning, which would be on a rotating basis. Members of the Chatham, Brewster, and Harwich Fire Department that would man the station and be the first responders for something that came out. And he felt that was something that we should try for a year to see how it would work, how it might work in order to to improve the efficiency and also reduce the amount of cost of manning it because it would be shared among the three. So I hopefully, he said that he had submitted that to the town managers of Orleans, Brewster, Harwich, and Chatham. So hopefully that might drift over to Sheila to take a look at, because I think that would be important.
Sheila Vanderhoff.
Sheila Vanderhoff, yeah. Does anybody know anything about the Hyannis Chamber of Commerce meeting? Their annual meeting?
I have not heard about it. I don't think there's anything in it.
It's being held at Willow Bend.
Not even on... Not
Well, they have an expansive group in the Hyannis area.
Okay. It's the trading area. Do you happen to know when it is?
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Yesterday I was at the Workforce Investment Board meeting, and they've added membership from the Wampanoags. Angela Schwam is now representing the Wampanoags on the Workforce Board, and they're looking at ways of supporting some programs that would be run through our Workforce Board in terms of collaboration with the Wampanoags. I was kind of excited about that. And Four Cs had canceled two programs because of funding. One was Diploma Plus, and the other was Schools to Career. And the Workforce Board had found some money to continue the Schools to Career program, which I think is very important because that's the what the conduit we're trying to provide. I went to the Cape Cod Neighborhood Support Coalition. Okay, that's the Beverly Costa Ciavola. She had arranged for I don't think you call it a facilitator, but an instructor to come down from NAMI of New Hampshire, and they gave a program. It was Tuesday on let's see, prevention strategies for suicide prevention, and as you know, tomorrow and Friday there's a PSTM. Now, what I'm told was that the program that was the other day was free, and the program that they're running on Thursday and Friday is post-event, response to what would be going on. But there continues to be interest in it, and I was interested to find out that they had about $3 million in state funding to support this initiative across the state. So that shows some interest in a time of decreasing budgets. I went to. We have an ongoing thing with the was it the review of the wastewater collaborative, and we're on track. I think they're going to come up with a document probably after they're going to submit it to the members for review, and then we'll talk about it on the 30th. We have a final meeting before they come up with a final document to submit to the three of us for evaluation, and they're on track for that. Did any of you know Bill Wendell?
Bill Wendell, yes. Well, I didn't know him very well, but I did see. I knew he was approaching not a good outcome because of his Lou Gehrig's disease.
He's passed.
Yeah, I saw that in the papers.
Kind of sad. And that's. I was very excited about about the fire chief. And he had several other ideas related to EMS. He's I think he's a past president of the EMS Association on the Cape, and he had come to us before he was chief and still in EMT about coordination. And of course, he expressed some concern about the progress with regard to the CMed. I guess his concern was how much urgency are we applying to finding other funding sources for to replace what we're giving this for this next quarter.
Well, I think the first issue we have is we're waiting for that report from the Department of Public Health, the Division of Public Health in the state.
Yeah.
They were asked by the legislature, House and Senate, to prepare a report, and Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray had an op-ed piece in the Cape Cod Times today about that. Sheila and I met with him 3 weeks ago when we went to Worcester for the regionalization conference. We had time to spend an hour with him before that conference and talk about some of these regional issues. And he understands it very well, and even in his article today, he talked about the state of Maryland. If you look at the comparison, approximately the same size as Massachusetts. They have something like 24 call centers, and we have something like 253 call centers. And how do you regionalize that and break it down? And that's something we have to do. But it seems as though the first step can't happen until this report comes out, because the DPH has been requested to look at this, just look at the number of call centers and see if they can't be reduced. We have something like 5 districts, and if there were a call center per district, that might be far more cost effective. But I'm looking at other, aside from the CMed, and we should check on that. How can we check on that to see where they are with their report? Just contact the department.
Yeah, I'd be happy to call them DPH.
That'd be great. I think we need to know where they stand, because we should move on that. And the other thing, in looking around at the different towns on the Cape, there's no question that there are police chiefs, fire chiefs, and other major department heads who are going to be retiring in the next year to 5 years. And this is the golden opportunity for us to get really moving on a regionalization plan. I'm thinking particularly of fire services. I look at the Upper Cape. Bourne now has a temporary interim fire chief. And the Falmouth fire chief I know is not that far away from retirement. And then the Mashpee fire chief, I'm not sure. I know he has a few more years to go, and I don't know about Sandwich. But I think we've got to start looking at some regionalization principles that we should define as a county government as to what we think the county can do and what resources we have to do it, and how we can help lead the way for towns to come together and begin to explore these regionalization options. Because if there's a fire chief that's going to retire, say a year from now, we should be in a position to be able to sit down with the communities and say, this is how we can help.
Well, we should be able to build them a template so that
that's what I'm exactly.
Here's the agreement that you need. Here's how you do the financing. Here's how you put those pieces together.
Exactly, and I think we need to put that on an agenda. Who would we need if we put this, say, on an agenda item in the next week or two, at the latest? Who would we need to bring here to come in and have that discussion?
Well, yeah, and I actually wanted to point out when Bill was, talking about, what it was doing with Harwich and Brewster and Chatham. In today's summary of items, actually, is some use of the local technical assistance grants that the Commission has to study with the town of Eastham kind of leading consolidation of municipal housing authorities. I think, maybe Paul has some monies available. I think what you really need is a consultant to help you build that.
That's right, we do.
Sheila has a grant to do the police piece, too.
She's doing the police piece, which is a much more difficult
much more difficult
piece.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, too, that the Lieutenant Governor, I didn't cut his article out, and I read it really pretty quickly this morning, but he talked about funding that's available to do this, to do this regionalization plan.
And I thought it was good that he was drawing attention to it.
Yeah.
But I was kind of taken aback by the fact that he didn't mention us. It was like there was nothing going on here. There was no reference to
Well, you have to remember, the state's idea of regionalization is not through regional government, really. It's through intermunicipal agreements. That's their philosophy, and it's because, in many parts of the state there isn't a regional government, so that their philosophy is different, so they don't think of it in terms of county terms.
No. And see, and neither do the towns, because I'm thinking of Falmouth. There's an intermunicipal agreement to operate a transfer station on the Upper Cape, Bourne, Falmouth, Mashpee, Sandwich. That's been in existence for, well, it was just renewed for another 15 years this past year. So that's been in place a long time, because that's where all the trash goes from the 4 towns, and it goes out to CMAS by rail, which makes a lot of sense because you don't have trucks all over the road. The selectmen just signed another non-binding MOU. Mashpee has signed on, Bourne has signed on, Falmouth signed on, we're waiting for Sandwich. An intermunicipal agreement to operate a regional wastewater treatment facility on the base. And the base is really very much supportive of this. And now that if they ever get their turbines delivered, they can't even get them over the road. But once they get them here, then that power, think of the power that could be produced by that to reduce the O&M, the operating and maintenance costs to operate a facility like that. Huge reductions, huge economies of scale. So I think that we need to get in the middle of, get in the lead on this, and really start building various structures of how county government can be part at different levels. We may participate one level in one area, different level in another area, but that's what we need to do. So maybe we bring Paul in and we have this discussion.
First step, it has to be. I think we need to know that.
And Joe Markarian, remember, I talked to him afterwards. He's with Department of Local Services with the state, and he spoke at the regionalization conference. I know him from when they did the financial review of Plymouth. And I asked him, I said, if we do this and we start providing these services, how do we actually track it? I mean, what kind of data do we need to know whether we have achieved economies and all this? He said, you don't have to create one, it will just happen. You will know from what you get back what's going on, and then you can develop a matrix and do that. But the state is really up there ready and willing to help support these.
What's the program? Well, I have. It was in today's paper. You said Tim's.
Well, Tim had a My View.
Yeah, My View.
It was a My View this morning.
For the funding source.
Yes.
Franklin County.
But he also mentioned funding.
Okay. Well, that part I didn't get a clear picture as to where the funding was. I know that there are grants that we're currently accessing, but the Franklin County model is one that is basically an intermunicipal agreement, and they act as a
It's a voluntary model.
It's a voluntary model, and the amount of money that's involved is about, I think it's less than $3 million.
Well, they provide the service, and they charge, they have fees
right, but they
to
have
the
to
different
recruit.
towns.
They have to recruit members. It's like a co-op.
Yeah.
It's a service co-op. So
Well,
they have to recruit.
It's not even that strong, I would say,
Right.
because it's voluntary.
Because they can opt out.
Yes, your
Which means
town.
they really don't have any security in continuation of the service, because if 1 year they decide not to do it, they just pull out of it.
Well, and the towns really contact them.
Well, let's go back to the fire one, because I think
the
that's what
fire.
you kind of need a specific specific goal in mind, and if it's to do some examination of the fire service, you need buy-in from the town, so you need to find towns who are willing to do this. So you have to talk to the selectmen, you have to talk to the town administrators, and you have to get their buy-in on that. Then I would say you have to put together a group, including the county and those localities, and a consultant that would help you work on building this template.
And that's what Roy Jones from Brewster is saying, that we need a consultant. But one of the points that that Bill Flynn says is that we already have some plans in some, let's say, in a beta, let's say sort of a beta site, that we could try some attempt for consolidation. And his thought is that we try it for a year to see what comes out of that. And I have to say that based upon my experience of setting things up, that's a good way to start, because the amount of investment is minimized.
Right.
Because the site is already.
Before you get to that point where you do that, you need at least in my mind, you need two things. You need a piece of paper that the community sign that says this is how this will work, basically. And in that piece of paper is the second thing somehow, is how does the budget get distributed. So
how do we initiate that?
Well, I think that's what when I say a consultant, I don't mean an engineering consultant. What you really need is you're really looking at a municipal law expert who can help you draft the intermunicipal agreement that spells out and understands.
Could Bob Troy help us with that?
It may be Bob Troy, it may be, I don't know what it could be.
I'm thinking that that since we have, because he represents works with Bourne as well as us, right?
He is Bourne's.
So he would have some understanding of municipal law, and I think that maybe we should start with him to see what his thoughts are with regard to whether or not he could help us start with a template of this, and then with his recommendation, we could then move that to sort of send an invitation to the 15 towns, saying that we'd like to get some determination of interest and support.
Well, I think we have to start small. I don't think we start big with the towns. I think we start small. And
I don't mean that we would try to get all of them on board.
Right.
We're trying to figure out who would nibble.
What subsets would there might be.
But if we decided to do fire first, because there's interest in your area of the Cape, and there may well be opportunities on the Upper Cape that we look at, but we need somebody in the fire service too, as part of this, to look at this model. Because
I have the impression that Bill Flynn's very interested in this.
Yeah, but then in looking at the model, you have to look at the service that's going to be provided, who's going to do it, and how is it going to be paid for?
Right, how you pay.
Because that's really the thing. How does this service get paid for? If you have an engine from Harwich that's going to Brewster and it has 3 people on it, and they respond to whatever it is, the building, fire, what have you, then how is Brewster going to pay for that?
Well, I will say that, don't forget, already you have, and Bill's absolutely right, you have, they don't rise to the level that we're talking about in terms of kind of the shared fire service between 3 towns. Doesn't quite right, but it rises to some level. We have these
mutual aid.
Mutual aid, thank you very much,
right.
Steve. It's a mutual aid agreement, so that if Bourne needs to assist Falmouth because Falmouth is doing something, down near the Falmouth Harbor, and there's a fire up near, North Falmouth, and Bourne has to answer, that's all taken care of. So there's those pieces in place.
Right.
And, that's a building block. And we need to kind
and brush breakers.
Exactly.
I mean, not every fire department has a brush breaker. So I think it's interesting to try to put together different models, because there may be different models.
Well, who maybe we should talk to is the Chiefs Association. Maybe they would have some better insight on.
Well, remember when the Chiefs were at some of the Chiefs were at the Assembly of Delegates.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't there.
Well, some of them were talking about this, and they were saying that they seem to be, or could be, or might be more supportive to the concept of this regionalization than the towns would be. In other words, they can see.
They said that. They said that the town would be more resistant.
More
than they
resistant
would be.
to it than the Chiefs would.
Yeah.
So if the Chiefs have that basic inclination to want to work towards something like that, then maybe it would be a good idea to get some of the Chiefs Association.
Why don't we invite some representatives?
Well, let me do this. Let me find out from Lee Parasite, because I talk to him periodically about, how's it going, because he attends the Chiefs Association meetings usually. Let me find out when their next meeting is. Might be better. We haven't gone there in a long time. We used to go to the Chiefs and the Police Association periodically, maybe once a year.
I was a regular attendee at the REPC.
Yeah.
Then they changed the day of their meeting.
Yeah, but this is a separate meeting with the Chiefs. Maybe we should go up and kind of broach this topic.
I think so. I don't think it's going to happen unless we
we have to provide. We have to exercise some initiative.
And that we take some leadership here and bring people together.
We'll take the initiative. We'll ask to be on the agenda. We'll start the conversation. So I think that would be a very positive thing for us to do.
I think so too. Well, because otherwise these opportunities are going to slip by.
Well, otherwise we
and we're
keep
going
on
to lose
talking about it.
them, and then we're going to keep on doing it the same way. Because, gee, if only we'd done something more a year ago.
Right.
I hate that expression.
That's new information. I can write that down.
Don't you love it?
No, I think this is great. Okay, so you'll follow
all
up.
right.
On
Wow.
I will, yeah.
Bob,
Absolutely.
good morning. Okay, what time is it? 11:25.
Okay, who's first on the agenda?
Well,
Tom was supposed
obviously
to
Mark's
be
not here, or
Well,
Peter.
he's
Tom,
Plato.
Tom's not here, no.
Why don't
Tom's
we
not
have play
here.
tonight?
So, are you going to talk about the biodiesel project?
I'm part of the group.
We're part of the group. Good.
Why is that would be biodiesel since we're all into it?
Yes.
Yeah, Clay's out there and
If they're-
Ball's out there. And
Well, let's have them all come
Kurt?
in, and we'll get started.
Yeah, it's almost 11:30.
Good morning. How are you? Good.
Oh, okay.
Clay is
there's
out
a couple
there.
of
Clay's
them.
here,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
we have Scott Lindell from the Marine Biological Lab. So we're going to try to keep.
Could you
it short.
come down front, please?
Yeah, it'd be great if we could use the
Actually,
front.
here,
Sure.
Gee, Paul, you just missed an interesting discussion on
Yeah, we've committed to
regionalization.
resources.
Yeah, we want somebody
Yes.
in line.
Getting Ryan.
On fire service
Fire.
consolidation. We can help you out.
Okay.
Oh,
That board over there.
what are you going to do? Oh, PowerPoint. On what?
No.
You want to project it this way, Clyde?
I was thinking I could take that and just put it over there. That way you can see it in the camera.
Not me. I'm way past that. Okay. Morning, Clay.
All righty.
Brought a couple of.
Hey, let me say that Sheila is delayed this morning. She intends to be here shortly.
Well, this is the algae project.
Did you want one of these? No.
I was up in Central Mass over the weekend. By the apples coming out of the apple farm. There used to be this little runoff from the apple farm. Whenever we were up there in the fall, it would be totally covered with green. So I looked out and I noticed it was cold, so apparently it doing some development. They must be scooping it up and using it for food.
Oh, you're just blowing. I was going to open the window.
Mine are probably.
Now we have more people.
250 BTUs each. You get enough fish in a room, you can keep it warm.
You just tell me when you're ready, Clay.
Okay.
Or Kurt. Who's taking the lead on this?
Clay.
Clay is, okay. Well, let me introduce the topic, if I may. We're going to be talking about the biodiesel project. And we have with us this morning Clay Schofield from the Cape Cod Commission and Kurt Felix, who's the CEO of Plankton Inc., Bob Curtis, who's the CEO of the RTDC, the Regional Technology Development Council. Yes, and Paul Nitsuki, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. Welcome. So,
could somebody hit this light switch?
Did I miss someone? No.
Scott Liddell should be here shortly.
And Scott Liddell from MBL?
Yeah, from MBL.
Okay.
To start it, we had a program we called the Renewable Fuels Partnership. And what we did was we got together, and one of the things that the county did was put biodiesel on their procurement, and that allowed a lot of the towns to switch to biodiesel. That was a fairly successful program. We also got the RTA to switch to biodiesel with their buses. So we created some demand for biodiesel, but we also were looking at funding a strategic implementation plan that would look at private sector investment in infrastructure. So that's how it got started. And actually it was Sheila that introduced me to Kurt. And Kurt and I had a roadshow for a while on biodiesel and ethanol. We also produced 2 forums, one on biodiesel that was very successful. We geared it to the people on the ground, the DPW workers and things like that would have to deal with the transition from diesel to biodiesel. We had people as far away as Marblehead come to that forum to understand, the pros and cons of biodiesel. We did one on ethanol as well. We actually were closing in on a deal with Gulf Oil, where they wanted to put an ethanol station somewhere in Massachusetts, and we convinced them that Cape Cod, being high visibility, would be the perfect place that visitors would come. They'd see that there's an ethanol plant on Cape Cod. How come we don't have one? But anyway, this all emerged through the relationship with Kurt and others into the idea of an algae biorefinery. Kurt does a lot of work, and we'll talk about that a little later, in Argentina, which was the other part of the kind of the deal. And we all got together. The county will administer the contract, if we get it, for a DOE contract to do a pilot project. And the partners are MBL, Woods Hole, the Argentines, and Kurt's firm. Again, we'll be in charge of administering the grant. We'll participate as best we can in, kind of inspiring economic development around this. And if all goes well, then they can move to a commercial plant, which will be, again, a big employer and economic engine for the area. But anyway, that's kind of the introduction. I wanted to turn it over to Kurt, who has a prepared program.
Sure. First of all, thank you for giving us the time today. We've been we're excited about this project, and we had done some preliminary briefings, but it's nice to have an opportunity to come before you formally and talk about this. And I think what we really wanted to do was try to keep it informal, mostly try to keep this as informational as possible for you to ask your questions about what's going on, and not necessarily to just come and provide a presentation. Clay gave a terrific overview of basically where we are, how we got formed, and where we're trying to head. There are a couple of key elements that I think are really interesting and exciting, especially for the county, around the fact that Bob Curtis, who's here with Regional Technology Development Corp, and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and Marine Biological Lab, right here, it's basically a Cape Cod grown kind of an effort. We're down in Wellfleet. And so I think with that sort of background, we're probably, ironically enough, if you look at other companies that are in other organizations that are working on something like this, we're really at the cutting edge in the country. There was an announcement recently by a firm out in California that's funded by Bill Gates' organization, and they're literally a couple of years behind where we are in terms of the project development. And more importantly, the Cape happens to be one of the world-class, probably best resources for algae, and that's just not an exaggeration. I mean, if you think about the whales and the kind of things that go on here in terms of shellfish, fish, the tremendous migration of the whales off Stellwagen Bank, and the productivity of our fishing resource on the Cape, it's primarily driven by algae.
If I may,
Sure.
could you make a distinction between what plankton is and what algae is? Because I always thought that whales, plankton and krill was what whales survived on. I never knew that they were dependent upon algae.
Plankton actually is the broad category that includes algae.
Okay.
So it's pretty much one and the same.
I think
The
that people
krill,
need to hear that.
yeah, the krill are actually they're a small shrimp-like organism that primarily feed on algae, and actually also are one of the big food resource for,
That's a
for
food
whales.
chain issue.
It's a food chain issue, and the base of the food chain is algae.
Okay.
So oysters, clams, most of the bivalves, they're filterers. It's really the very, very bottom of the pyramid in terms of food in the marine chain. And of course, we're not going to be in the marine chain or get involved in the ocean. We're going to do it in an industrially controlled way. But I also wanted to have Bob speak to RTDC's role in this before I kind of get into my discussion, because I think it's really important. This whole project wouldn't have come together without some of the partners that have been involved in making informal introductions. Sheila involving some folks in Congressman Delahunt's office early in this process, and trying to champion this effort well before she became a commissioner, introducing me to Clay, and Clay working on what he's been working on, and then Bob working on what he's been working on with Marine Biological Lab in Woods Hole.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you, and I don't know whether I should stand up or sit down or
Whichever. Yeah. Well, you're fine.
Okay,
Fine.
fine enough. But thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and to present as part of this group on a very exciting project in this algae and biofuels grant. Excuse me, I'm just going to give a couple slides of who the RTDC is for those who may not know, and then really focus on what our role was in this and where we see this taking from an economic development standpoint, from Woods Hole's participation standpoint, where this grant can go forward. Next slide, please. So the RTDC is a nonprofit organization that was established a little over 2 years ago to advance the identification and commercialization of discoveries from basically the Woods Hole research institutions, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and the Marine Biological Laboratory primarily, although we do work with NOAA and U.S. Geological Survey also. And it was started as an economic development initiative to develop technology-based companies here on the Cape to diversify the workforce base here on the Cape, away from just the service industry, and to provide to leverage the assets that we have at Woods Hole, which is about $170 million a year in research, which is quite a bit for a non-medical school-based research institution. That's an enormous amount of money. So, it was time for the Cape to really take advantage of this, and that was really what we were formed to do, in not only starting companies, but licensing technology and facilitating research and interactions in industry-sponsored research. Next slide.
Is that Bill Zammer's?
Bill was the founding chairman.
Okay.
Yes, and he's retired, and I meet with him every once in a while. Bill Jackson is now our current chairman. So this is basically a Cape Cod Times article that came out just over 2 years ago, and it kind of shows you this is what we're really trying to do. Is we've really been trying to fire up Woods Hole from a commercialization technology transfer standpoint. And we had a symposium a couple of years ago down at Hui that kind of introduced the organization, and it's really kind of was our launching of the effort. So thank you. Just kind of as our relationships with Hui and MBL evolved, this year we've made 2 announcements because it really has been very successful so far on both sides of the table, from Hui and MBL's as well as RTD's standpoint. In March, we actually announced a formal relationship with Hui where they actually help fund us now, and we formally represent them for all technology transfer issues, startups, licensing, etc. A similar agreement was then signed shortly thereafter. Actually, it was signed in April but announced in July, between the Marine Biological Lab. So we now represent both organizations for their tech transfer activities. And this is a very unique outsourcing of a function that's usually held inside. The problem is neither institution had the resources to really do it at a high quality level, but by joining forces, and they both provide some of our funding, not all of it, but part of our funding, we're able to provide a very high level of service to the institutions. And I'm just going to flip through this. So this is kind of gives you an idea of the areas of interest where we're active. In this case, the alternative energy is the focus for today's discussion with the biofuels, but we're doing quite a bit in the marine science environment, and actually we've actually helped MBL get a recent aquaculture grant on a new technology process. But this is really the key, and let's focus on the biofuels. This is an announcement that was put out by Plankton and NRTDC that really, I think, is the epitome of a public-private partnership. In that you have the other bodies involved, obviously the Cape Cod Commission, Hui, MBL, the Massachusetts National Guard, Mass Development, and Congressman Delahunt's office. I mean, this is not, I give Kurt and everybody involved an enormous amount of credit for really pulling this off. And I think this is a great example of a private sector working with the public sector and a lot of other people trying to help in between to be able to even announce this consortium. Now this is the submission of a grant. We don't have the grant yet. We're hopeful, but the fact that that this group was able to come together, and all the sun, the moon, and the stars lined up behind this grant. Okay, this is a very, very unusual coalition of groups that were able to work very well together in a short amount of time to put in a very substantial opportunity for the Cape. In terms of our role, we participated as part of the committee that Clay was initially talking about before. Mark Forrest got us involved, and we started sitting around in July. And I'm not going to go through all the details because I think somebody else will cover that. But our role was to serve as the interface between that committee and the Woods Hole research institutions. So we're really a facilitator in identifying the key researchers. We identified Scott Lundell at MBL. We identified Chris Reddy at Hui, who unfortunately won't be able to join us today, as the leads from each institution to move forward. We've assisted Plankton Power in facilitating that relationship because, again, Kurt is starting up an entrepreneurial startup. I mean, and it's a big challenge in and of itself. We tried to help smooth that relationship with the research institutions, which tend to be very academic, very ivory tower science-oriented institutions. So we're sort of a bridge. And we tried to help that organization, that effort. We actually, fun thing, we organized a dinner for the visitors from Argentina, where a number of the people were able to participate, which was a great kickoff to the relationship in pulling not only the technology base from Argentina, the people involved with that, but all the research institutions, the commission, and the other major players involved. Some of the other things we've been working with, we've recently involved in helping Plankton Power identify legal representation for their intellectual property, because our role is more than just helping Woods Hole. Our role is to make the project work. And so if there's other areas of expertise that we can lend to these groups, whether it be Plankton or the Commission or whoever else it may be, we're there, very much there to help. And so and the intellectual property is going to be a very important part of the project on a long-term basis in terms of its ability to continue to commercialize. And we've been working with Plankton Power in the development of their business plan and identifying sponsors, or actually investors, to represent the private part of the match to the grant, the 20% grant. So we've been spending a lot of time with Kurt on that. Again, it's not a Woods Hole function, but it's an effort to make the whole project work. What's really the possible benefits? And it's not funded yet, but we're hopeful that the $16 million grant submitted to DOE plus 20% private match. Of that, WHOI will receive $2.44 million over 3 years, and MBL will receive $2.04 million over 3 years. So about $4.5 million of research money is now going to those. It will go to those institutions, again with the caveat that it gets funded, that they actually would have been involved with if it wasn't for the RTDC. And we get full credit from both institutions for that. Because we put out a press release just announcing the consortium, and this is, and I think there's a difference in the approaches, because a lot of times when you see a press release from the Woods Hole groups anyway, it's very scientifically oriented. It goes to scientific journals. Cape Cod will pick up on it, but the national business press does not. So we actually led an effort with Plankton Power to make sure it did get national and international attention, and it resulted in 2 companies contacting WHOI and MBL that have resulted in 2 additional smaller grants being filed with their participation, so additional economic benefit to the Woods Hole groups.
I just want to interrupt you for a second, Bob,
yeah.
and to clarify on that point, those opportunities wouldn't have come together if it wasn't for this focus on biofuels that they didn't have before. I mean, it's really a very unique thing that all of a sudden there's a lot of momentum building in this particular area that absolutely wouldn't have happened without Bob's, really trying to pull the institutions together, pull them away from a scientific orientation to what can we do from a public policy standpoint, what are the key issues that they may have some expertise and research capability to assist with. So I just want to give you a little more credit.
Thank you.
Taking for that.
I remember them saying that.
Because actually when we first approached WHOI and MBL, they didn't do this type of research.
Right.
According to them.
Right.
And then when we started getting traction, Kurt really started to lead the effort here. We went back to them, twisted a few arms in a very nice way, and at least got them to listen. And now it's a major new focus at both institutions from a research initiative. Both institutions are now establishing major programs and pursuing other opportunities in the algae and biofuel technology space. So we've been working with MBL and WHOI now in helping to establish that base and that core competency so that they can compete for other grants and work with other institutions to expand this whole effort in the algae by their expertise and technical capabilities. What's already happened from this, because of this new focus, 2 new preliminary patents for technology in algae and biofuel have been filed by WHOI. So now they're really starting to look at what do they have from an intellectual property standpoint, and they may or may not end up getting issued, but they could form the form of the basis for an intellectual property for a new company that could be formed, or a license with an existing company. So there's quite a bit that's actually that's trickled down from this effort for this $120 million grant application, which is an enormous effort. I don't want to minimize that. From an economic development impact, this is clearly a new industry opportunity for the Cape, and it certainly is a technology-based opportunity. It leverages the local institutional expertise and geographical assets, in this case, Mass Military Reservation. It is, again, sun, moon, stars all lining up. New technology-based employment opportunities, which tend to be more well-paying, year-round types of jobs. This pilot facility, if it gets built under this grant, could potentially serve as an incubator for new companies and new technology that's coming out as a test bed that could be spun out from there. And again, I can't say enough about the. If there's one success I think we've absolutely had is this excellent relationship between the groups to form this public-private partnership to make this grant get submitted. So just a summary, I mean, we're pretty much just sort of a hands-on facilitator that identifying new opportunities that are consistent with the activities of WHOI MBL. And that's our primary focus. But that can be very loosely defined. Again, helping to find patent attorneys for Plankton to make it work. We try to facilitate interaction with private industry and the Woods Hole Research Institute. We are working in other areas besides algae and biofuels. This is probably the most prominent right now. And we're assisting consortium members like Plankton in achieving overall goal to benefit all those involved. Let's make this program work, even if it's not going to help Hui and MBL in what I do today. It will by helping this grant get funded. So we're pretty broad in terms of our activities. That's pretty much it. Any questions?
Yeah.
Could I have the light, please?
When you talk about this being a resource, where are you going to do the industrial manufacturing of this product?
Yeah, I'll in a nutshell at NMR, and I can get into that. I actually have some slides on it to show you where and sort of discuss.
The thing that occurs to me is if you have a nutrient-rich environment as you would have in a treatment plant, it would seem to be a possibility for growing your algae. And I was wondering if that was one of your plans.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You've hit one of the real key highlights of the whole thing.
Okay.
And I think there's the opportunity there to provide a sewage treatment solution for the Cape with growing algae, because actually the growing of algae uses two waste products.
Yes.
Power plant or industrial emission sources and sewage. Those are the two basic nutrients. And out of that you get this beautiful biomass, which happens to produce oil that we turn into biodiesel.
Just one follow-up. When I'm dealing with like gas and with other types of let's say biomass, one of the issues was creating pellets and creating grates that would support it for basically the heating fuel or for combustion support for generation. Mm-hmm. You say when you're talking about biodiesel, you're talking about putting fuel into in some type of vehicle. Is that in addition?
Yeah, biodiesel is used primarily in obviously in heavy-duty buses, trucks, diesel cars, but actually the largest use is for home heating oil. So a lot of people don't realize that those are absolutely the same product.
Well, yeah, number two heating oil.
Yeah, number two heating oil.
Diesel, yeah.
Yeah, so probably 80% of the United States home heating oil is used in the Northeast United States. It's an enormous amount of fuel, and that's the primary focus. It's significantly bigger. Probably 30% of the use is in transportation. About 70% is, or maybe 65% is actually for heating. Still one of the most important uses of it.
I have some questions, but I think I'm going to hold them until after your presentation, because I think you will either answer them or I have more questions when you're done. So.
Let me just over here.
Paul, are you sitting in for Clay right now, or are you?
I never presume to sit in for Clay, but I'm here.
Okay.
This is just to give you a little bit of an overview in terms of the market. I was alluding to if you look, for example, right here. This is actually what we use for residential heat for oil in the Northeast right now, and just the residential heating alone is significantly bigger than the transit portion. So most people think of diesel as being a transportation fuel, but it's really not the major focus. There's a little bit used for power generation. There's a fair amount that is used in commercial buildings for commercial heat as well. But the big component is residential heating, which is also one of the more polluting sources of combustion out there right now. The oil that's used for residential heating actually is allowed to have a little bit more sulfur, so it actually produces more sulfur dioxide. So to the extent that we can use a bio-based fuel with no sulfur that burns a lot cleaner, it's a major pollution reduction impact in an area where there aren't too many options. The other thing I wanted to point out from this slide is there's a Massachusetts requirement. The governor and the legislature about a year ago passed a biofuels mandate legislation, which requires 2% of fuel used in Massachusetts in both home heating oil and for transportation sources that it be bio-based. That's going through a rulemaking process, but if you look at what that 2% amounts to in comparison with the rest of the use, it's a relatively small, very small portion, but certainly a very positive start. The project that we're working on at Otis would provide, in its pilot scale, just about enough biodiesel for the entire, what the Cape currently uses for biodiesel. There are a number of people out there like Loud Fuel, and I think Snows is providing a bioheat. You'll hear that advertised. Cape Cod Oil. There are a number of distributors who are now blending biofuel in, and the Cape uses about 1 million gallons a year right now. So this facility would be able to largely supply it locally instead of from some other sources. Bob kind of touched on some of the major local synergies and benefits. One of the ones that I know is kind of near and dear to Paul's heart is also the opportunity, because of the location at MMR, to potentially use the rail link that's actually nearby to that facility. If we get to a commercial scale, this project would easily be able to start exporting biofuel by both rail and ship. And clearly the Cape Cod Canal is a resource in that regard, and clearly the rail link could come back into prominence as a major commercial link. So I think of all of those, obviously, Bill, you mentioned before or touched on the wastewater treatment issue. Right now, this project would use about 25% of the current Otis Air Force Base's sewage at the 1 million scale. At a commercial scale of 50 to 100 million gallons per year production, we would need to source from probably about 10 facilities. So what that gives you a sense of is that as you start to really produce a lot of fuel from this particular resource, it becomes almost a suck for sewage and other kinds of waste products, and would present a significant benefit to the communities. I know Falmouth and Bourne.
So if the Upper Cape towns actually entered into a municipal agreement to build a wastewater facility, that would be a major plus.
It would be a huge plus.
We've already signed a non-binding MOU. We're waiting for one more town to sign off.
You have some sense as to what the cost per gallon or some sort of BTU content with regard to this versus number 2 oil?
Yeah, the BTU content's about the same. So on an energy basis, algae is terrific. I mean, a lot of people think that oil in the ground actually came from algae historically. Hundreds of millions of years ago. That it just has a lot of other stuff that the ground has put into it, which is all the pollutants. So right. So from an energy standpoint, what we actually are capable of producing now is a little bit better than diesel fuel. In the wintertime, diesel fuel gets cloudy at about 12 degrees F, and the algae biodiesel gets cloudy at about 10 degrees F, so it's a little bit better in cold weather. In the wintertime in New England, we of course blend diesel and kerosene and port point depressants to get to the minus 20 or 30 that we sometimes get, that distributors have to make sure is out in the system so that people don't have problems. But in a nutshell, it's the same.
It sounds like it's also a great contribution to enriching waste material, which is on some of the trash to energy projects, because there's, although there's been less need of it, there was always a concern as far as support of trash in terms of BTU content, and this might be a less expensive way of doing that.
It's funny you should bring up trash, because one of the things that we're looking at right now as one of the CO2 resources is using the Bourne landfill, and using the methane and the carbon dioxide that's being generated from the landfill as the CO2 source for the project. So, and also looking at CMAS as a potential source. CMAS is obviously burning trash and producing a lot of carbon dioxide. And as part of our Department of Energy grant application, we've included a component to figure out how to basically get those types of pollution sources to a facility that might be located elsewhere. As you start to scale commercially, at about 100 million gallons, we'd be using more than what the Morant power plant would generate, for example, in terms of emissions. There'd be a pipe on the top of that power plant, and the stack wouldn't go up anymore. It would be a pipe that would go into the algae farm. That's how significant it can be. So those are some of the big regional impacts, potential impacts, as a major pollution mitigator.
Well, another thing that you mentioned, one of the issues up there is the bunker C oil has a high acidic content, and it attacks the precipitators and the mechanisms for reducing the amount of emissions off of the stack. you mentioned the potential of less, let's say less particulate or contributory matter in the algae. Is it a possibility that this could, in concentrations, replace bunker C as let's say as a fuel source for a plant like Morant?
Sure. Yeah. If you can produce enough material, you can act. It's that plant, the liquid fuels plants typically can burn either bunker C or number 2. They're burning bunker C because it's cheaper, but you could easily produce. You could easily use algae oil in that plant. There are other considerations, I think, at least at the corporate level, with Morant to look at doing natural gas or biomass or some other alternatives. They're kind of feeling their way through the process right now in terms of what their future is. And that's really unclear, I think, to anybody at this point. But
just one final question on that. There's the transportation cost with, in transporting oil from a refinery to a distribution network. Is this factored into because if you're manufacturing in one place and bringing it to another, there's a transport cost. What does that do in terms of let's say your overall cost of doing this as an alternative?
Well, to think about it, biodiesel, for example, that might be produced from soy in the Midwest costs about 25 cents to ship from the Midwest to the East Coast.
25 cents
per gallon.
Okay, that's 8 pounds.
And typically shipping in large, bulk transit, the super tankers that oil companies are using, there's probably about a 2 to 5 cent per gallon cost associated with that. When we produce locally, and no matter what, all of those fuels are going to a distribution point. So from whatever the distribution point is, you're always trucking it to the house or to the fuel station or whatever. So in our case, we'd simply be eliminating all that cost. We'd be in a position to distribute directly to the distributors and substantially reduce the pollution associated with it, the cost associated with it. The big challenge is making it economic. Getting the conditions right from a land standpoint, from a input standpoint, to make it cost effective. We've got a technology that on an energy basis and a cost basis will allow us to produce oil at the equivalent of close to $40 a barrel. So with today's oil prices, this would be profitable. And that's a commercial scale, not obviously a pilot scale. At pilot scale, you've got a lot of people involved. It's much more expensive. But when you do the numbers on a much larger scale, it makes a lot of sense. We kind of touched on some of these points, but basically one of the business objectives is to reduce that transportation cost. You obviously make it much more cost effective. And the other thing is to get a scale that starts to approach what the oil industry currently produces in. And I think the best analogy I can think of is when you go into the grocery store and you get a bottle of water, or you get that gallon of water on the grocery store shelf. If you turn that $2.50 plastic bottle into a per gallon cost, it's about $32 a gallon. Mm-hmm. And when you compare that with the oil companies shipping a gallon of something from Saudi Arabia or wherever and ending up in your tank at $2 to $2.50, it's just amazing. You have to understand what the impacts of scale are, but also how efficient that oil companies are in getting product to market now. And obviously, for the economy to function and grow, we've got to be able to do the same thing. That's really the bottom line. One of the nice things about algae crude oil, as we talked about or touched on a little bit, it actually is almost the same as what crude oil is. And there are refining techniques that would allow you to take the crude oil and turn it into not just biodiesel, but also biogasoline that you could use as a gasoline substitute, and biojet fuel so that you could use it as aviation fuel. And that's one of the other big advantages of getting to a commercial scale, where you can start to use a traditional refining technology to produce a drop-in replacements for the fuels that we're using now that are not only domestically produced but a lot cleaner.
Hasn't, whether it be your product or a similar product, hasn't it been used in one of the Air Force or one of the jets that and it was successful, and that's what helped them get very excited.
Yeah.
On this whole thing when they saw that actually flew.
Yep. The airline industry has sort of the same problem that the home heating oil customers have. You know, there's very little out there to be able to substitute for what they're using for fuel. And in fact, Sheila, the airline industry has an effort right now to develop an aviation fuel standard for biofuel. They've done test flights. Continental has done a test flight. Japan Airlines, New Zealand, Virgin Atlantic, GE is very involved in this effort, and they've had excellent results. Not only very good results in the test flights, but also results that indicate that when you mix biofuel into traditional aviation fuel, they actually get better fuel economy. They're actually improving fuel economy. They're also seeing a benefit as far as lower temperature of when the fuel gets cloudy. Aviation fuel gets cloudy around, say, 50. The design point's about minus 50 degrees, and these bio-based fuels are getting down to like minus 75. So there are two big benefits from biofuel. It's really quite remarkable.
You said cloudy several times. What does that mean?
There's a wax component in diesel and in these types of fuels. And so as it gets colder and colder and colder, that wax component can start to come out of solution.
Okay.
It's sort of like when you take olive oil from the table and you put it in the refrigerator, it gets cloudy.
Okay, and that wax content interferes with this combustibility?
It inhibits its ability to flow through a fuel filter. So if you get a clog in your fuel filter, then you're not getting fuel any longer.
You have to reheat it in some way.
Right. Yeah, or get the temperature up.
Or it doesn't change the characteristics of the combustibility content.
Well, and actually the wax is part of the benefit. That component actually is a high BTU component in petroleum, so you kind of want it. You just want to keep it in solution. In terms of what biodiesel looks like from a pollution standpoint, basically you've got about 47% lower particulate matter, 67% lower unburned hydrocarbons. The DOE has looked at typical biodiesel and calculated about a 78% lower life cycle carbon dioxide reduction. And it's not 100%, even though the plant is recycling CO2, because the assumption is that the transportation part of it, shipping and trucks and so on, you're going to use some petroleum fuel, so it's not really 100%. If everything was running on biofuel, then it would be closer to 100%. But that's with today's distribution network. And 100% lower on sulfur dioxide, because there's absolutely no sulfur in these biofuels. So a big reduction in a component that causes acid rain. The other big one is there are no carcinogens in biodiesel or biofuels in general, which I think is it's amazing to me that we're still pulling the kinds of things that we are out of the ground and using them as fuel. This to me is one of the bigger elements of where biofuels I think really start to take a big leap up, not just in terms of national security, but in terms of this sort of thing that we live with and don't really think about very much. But it's certainly out there. The DOE grant, there's actually about a $480 million pot of money nationally that Congress allocated under the ARRA, and specifically for integrated biorefineries. We think New England is probably in line for something like $90 million of that on a regional basis. And our application is for about $20 million for this facility. So we wouldn't even use the entire pot of what's available for New England. I think Bob's covered most of the other elements in here in terms of the overall grant, but it's just, from Sheila's involvement and from the Commission's involvement from the get-go in terms of really trying to help and support this and everybody working together, I think we've got one of the best teams in the country to be able to go after this, and I'm very, very optimistic that we'll have some great success in getting the grant.
When will you know?
Well, there are companies that are being notified now of interview, and Paul will be the first to know. So the Department of Energy will notify the Commission as soon as they would like to interview our team. It could happen any week now.
Is there any word on? I mean,
Not yet. There's been some additional, there's been some delays in the process, and so there's been some notification, but we haven't received any official word yet.
One of the other.
Excuse me, Paul. What is our benefit out of all of this? What part do we have in this?
Well, I was just going to say,
Paul?
you're here, so.
Well, I mean, we were approached to help them look at how you can make all these connections. You know, obviously we've got wastewater, regional wastewater issues, location on the base, discussion with Mirror. What's Mirror going to do? Are they going to have a new transmission line? They want to change to combined cycle gas. They have CO2 sequestration needs over there. And so could we help these existing Cape entities come together and contribute their resources to promote this industry sector down here? So we've been helping with the facilitation there, and we helped a lot. Clay in particular helped a lot on the grant writing side.
Okay, so that it's in the area of the economic development responsibility.
Yeah, but it's you know, it's one of those perfect projects where you're creating a cleaner environment and promoting economic development.
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, since you're here and you're in the county, I have to push, and I'm not sure if you have because I came in late, but of course I'll emphasize the role of the county in this endeavor. But you know, Clay and I mean, excuse me, and I do this constantly to these two. Kurt and myself know each other from Wellfleet, and he approached me. But I had also, at the same time, was getting to know Clay Schofield as a delegate. And he would hold this round table, and Bob was just this voice that came out of this box that was in the middle of the table. And Clay was, of course, I'm not going to remember the name of the group. What was the name of that group, Bob? His renewable energy collapse.
Alternative energy.
Yes,
yeah.
Sort of. And it was really sort of like people would come and talk about their ideas and what they were kind of doing, and Bob always had his ear to the ground, like, you know, is there anything interesting there? And then we had a energy talk down in Provincetown that wasn't well advertised, but these two met, Clay and Kurt, and then we said, let's do that again. And actually, I've just gotten a call yesterday that they want to do another forum like that on energy, so it would be a good thing to sort of advertise where you are and get the Cape Light Compact down there, what they're doing. But anyway, and so then that just started the ball rolling as far as these two struck a friendship and a similar interest, and Bob picked up on it, and then we brought Paul in on the. Actually, we brought Mark in, and then we brought Paul in. So, and then I'm here. I'm on this side of the assembly. So. It's just rolled along really great, and it's been a lot of work on all of their part, and it's been very exciting. And of course, I just get to keep my finger in there because I introduced everybody. But that's all the work I've done. So it was great. It's really exciting, and I know that there's a lot of these projects out there. You know, some people say, oh, there's 200 or so projects across the country that are all exploring this, and they're big companies, and you know, I've talked to some former professors of mine down in Maryland about this that I was having dinner with over the summer. So they sent me all of these materials because now their interest is piqued. And even though there may be a lot of money and bigger dogs in a sense, I think that you're in a very good position in that lineup. You know, you're not at the bottom of 200. You're more towards the top. And there's nothing wrong with coming in second or third there for a long time until that final stretch. So I think you're in a good position. I think it's still a very promising position here. So.
One of the things that's been encouraging from my standpoint, not only what Sheila's talking about is the fact that this is a generically homegrown effort. I mean, It really is all about people. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of times I think in economic development circles we kind of think of, well, if BP were willing to invest some money here or Exxon, then maybe something could happen. And the reality is that most businesses, and obviously the biggest job creators in the country, are small businesses. And it's always something that we talk about on the Cape. How do you get small businesses going? How do you do this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the types of things that Sheila did with taking a risk and saying, hey, let me call Mark Forrest and let's see if we can, put this group together. Let's talk about this more. Involving Clay, involving the commission, but sort of just, and what Bob's been doing, facilitating people getting together around ideas that make sense. And sometimes they're older businesses, and sometimes they're newer businesses. This one happens to be pretty exciting, but that's really, I think, the hallmark of what small business is all about. And you know, I'm extremely grateful for all of the support that we've gotten from the commission, from the county, from political leaders. I'll talk about in a minute too, but that's really what it takes.
Pat, did you have a question?
No, I'm going to wait till you finish because
sure.
I have a couple of questions.
Our project team is kind of a who's who. I don't know if you know Joe Fitzpatrick, but Joe was one of the first Secretary of Energy for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He's on our board. His partner, Ed Liston, who they developed Citizens Energy many years ago. They're involved in helping to steer the effort. So we've kind of got a group of people that are. Rob Pratt used to run the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, MTC, for several years. He founded a company, a wind company in Costa Rica that he sold for about $100 million. But these are people that know how to grow small business, know energy, and really I think understand this technology and are very supportive to try to assist in making sure that this is a successful business enterprise. Another guy I wanted to mention in here is Steve Drummey, who's off Cape, but Steve actually has built 4 algae projects in the country already, and it represents an enormous asset to us to be able to construct this facility. Bob alluded a little bit to some of the press that came out from the announcement, and I just threw this pie chart together. Most of the press has been U.S. based, but what's really surprising is when you undertake an effort like the one that Bob really pushed to try to do, that brought in these 2 other leads for Woods Hole and Marine Biological Lab in the marine biofuels space. Things happen all over the world. I'm getting calls from Japan. I'm getting calls from the UK, Germany. People that are interested in either helping, investing, or getting the technology in their countries. So a lot of other really interesting things are happening in that sphere. We've talked a lot about the partnership, but I don't think you can emphasize it enough. You know, in terms of the Commission's role as not only as Paul alluded to, a facilitator and making connections and putting people together that should try to work together, but also as grant administrator. Very good role for the Commission to do, as a government agency, oversee the grant distribution of funds. And of course, some of the best marine biologists in the world at Woods Hole and NPL. We've talked about most of this, so I'll kind of skip over that. We've talked about the basic project. One thing I do want to emphasize is that mostly what we're doing with this technology is taking an existing platform, which is unlike many companies that are doing research and development. This is something that's been in development for about 20 years in Argentina, and over the last 3 years has demonstrated commercial capability. And the main reason we're doing it in the United States is, one, the region in Argentina is almost exactly like the Cape in terms of climate. It's very far south, and if you look at a map, it's basically as far south as we are north. But the other reason is that in Argentina, they don't have a market economy, so fuel prices are subsidized there. So this very interesting group of people that developed, I think, probably the best technology in the world, don't have an opportunity to develop it because they can't sell their fuel inside their own country. It's cost effective here, but with subsidized oil prices in Argentina, it's not. So that's one of the reasons why we're bringing it here. This is kind of an overview just to give you a pictorial of. We had looked at in terms of where the Morant plant is located, and potentially one of the sites that we're looking at the military base, which is the outflow for the water treatment plant right now. But as you can see, the Morant plant is very well located relative to Otis to potentially be able to use those emissions in the project. We've talked about most of these. This is kind of just a little bit of a schematic of kind of what the thing would look like. I think most people are curious about this. It does kind of look like an industrial facility, or like a hydroponic facility, or a nursery, or that sort of thing. It's sort of a blend, for permitting. We do have to go through a national environmental policy assessment for permitting the facility. And one of the challenges was, what bucket does this fit in? Is it an industrial plant? Is it an agricultural operation? So we'll sort that out, but basically nobody knows.
Right.
And the answer is this is kind of a weird thing.
Where we can get them.
It sounds like it's a solution to Wellfleet's downtown sewage treatment plant. Just a question occurs to me that I don't know if you're familiar with either one of Friedman's books or his continuing columns, but this seems to be the kind of thing that he doesn't know about, and it could probably do you a lot of good to find out whether or not he's willing to, let's say, to look at this, because this seems to be the kind of thing that whenever he gets into his columns about what China is doing, this is the kind of thing that that China isn't doing, that we're doing. And I think it would be kind of exciting to find out if he could pick up on it, because it can't help but sort of move this whole process along.
Right. Actually, the person who was working on the press release for us that Bob had pulled into the effort knows Tom Friedman quite well, and actually did speak to him about it. So we're trying to work that channel a little bit. But I think I'm a huge fan of his. And clearly he's the one that's sounded the alarm that as China and India develop, in order for us to meet their energy needs, we'll need about the equivalent of 6 or 8 Saudi Arabias by 2012, just to meet China's needs alone. Forget India. So we've got real serious issues around energy security and developing new resources. So clearly, this is critically important.
Yeah, and I hope we get past the rhetoric that supports and the action that doesn't. That we seem to have at the federal level. Hopefully, we're starting to get into this.
Well, I think this Department of Energy Integrated Biorefinery effort, which Obama just about doubled the funding for, is, in my mind, one of the most exciting things I've seen, because the focus is all commercialization. It's not about R&D any longer. It's about, let's solve the problem, and let's put funding into things that are going to work, that can make immediate and significant contribution. And I think what you've seen over the summer in the press, because of the Exxon announcement and some of the others, people are calling it kind of the summer of algae, because people are starting to focus on that as a very, very significant resource. And the main reason is that not only can we make it cost effectively, but on an area about the size of Maryland, or what would represent about 2% of current agricultural land in production in the United States. So not using agricultural land, but just to kind of think about it conceptually, on about 2% of the existing agricultural land, you could produce the entire country's transportation fuel needs from algae. So it's something that has the potential for very, very significant national impact.
I got a chance to talk to some of the people from the Department of Energy here during the summertime, and I suggested that with all of the median strips that they have, they should convert it to switchgrass, and then use that as a biomass source. And they immediately came up with, you don't know what the unintended consequences are. And I said, well, one of the things you have to look at is, if we are attacking a food source, which is what they're doing with some of the
corn
ethanol, that we should look at other alternatives, and I didn't come away with the feeling that they were positively oriented towards finding solutions. They seem to be positively oriented to focusing on the problem. So I think that solution orientation is where we're going to find an outcome of this. Now, are you going to integrate wind into this in order to generate the energy in order to support some of this?
We actually integrate, two things. One, if it looks like the Bourne landfill will probably be one of the main sources of energy, using the methane to produce energy. So that's using a waste natural methane stream. The other is, within the design itself, we actually use solar. One of the things that we do that's different from a lot of other companies, and is particularly important for the Cape. Obviously, there's a lot of cloudy days on the Cape, and during the wintertime, you can get weeks on end of kind of that gray, miserable stuff.
Our insulation is very low.
Yeah, our insulation is fairly low, which, ironically enough, algae that come from 60 to 80 feet are used to that. But what we do is we make sure that the light levels within our production system are at optimum levels year-round. And the way we do that is with simple LED lighting that supplements if the sun isn't strong enough. and that runs off of a simple solar cell and a little photon that can figure out how much sunlight's hitting, and just basically make sure that the light levels are optimal year round. And that little innovation allows us to produce in an otherwise not so necessarily great area.
Okay, I know that we're going to be running out of time, and first of all, I want you to introduce this gentleman here beside you and see if he has anything to add. And I know Pat has some questions, and Paul, I don't know if you want to weigh in on anything of consequence of the Commission's role or where you're at with that or whatever, but
Hi. Scott Lindell from Marine Biological Lab.
Okay.
And I had some visuals, but I know we're short of time.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Many of you probably been
Well, I just
We're short of time.
I just need to make a tape change.
Oh, okay,
I got all day.
Oh, all right, fine. All right, so we can go forward, but I just
You got all
thought
day.
have this gentleman here.
Isn't that when the people contact?
Well, some people have until all day.
We'll let Kurt finish
but
that.
the rest of
I've got 5
us
slides,
don't.
so it won't be very much.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty much close to the end. I just wanted to sort of wrap up by saying that one of the things that we've done is produce basically an integrated system, which is very unique. Sheila talked about this in terms of where we fit with some of the other big dogs that are running out there, and there. Everything that I've seen, both from, and part of this also came from the intellectual property attorneys that we're working with that Bob introduced us to, as they did sort of their deep dive on where do you fit relative to everything else that's going on in the country. They're very comfortable that we're probably 2 to 3 years ahead of most people in the U.S. Because of Paul's hard work and sort of doing some of the spade work with with Morant and with a little bit with Otis and Mark's work there, and sort of getting these pieces of the puzzle all put together, we've got a project that's better formed than companies that have $100 million in venture capital. We're ready to go. We've got the site, we have the resources, we've got the right climate, we have the right technology, we have the right science partners, we've got the right public partners. There are very few teams out there that really have what we have. We've also received nice letters of support from Congressman Delahunt's office for the project that have been going into the Department of Energy. We got one from Senator Kerry's office on file.
That's great.
One from Nikki Songas. Barney Frank is going to be sending in one, I think, this week. Ed Markey probably toward the end of next week. So we will have an incredible amount of support from the delegation as well with regard to this effort. And with that, I kind of want to flip it over, unless you have questions.
I just want to mention something, a personal experience that I had with General Electric years ago, where we invested a lot of time and energy as a small company to develop a product, and it started to take off. And as soon as it started to take off, General Electric said, "Oh, it's taking off." So they basically went into that business and captured it because they had, they had more money and they had superior distribution. So one of the questions is as you're finding your partners, the county's resources are relatively limited, and the federal government's appetite for these things, does not tend to be infinite. So I'm wondering, do you have your venture capital money to get you to the next point?
The short answer is yes. We're working to raise additional funding for this particular round, both as a private match to the federal dollars. Since we're in the process of actually doing approving of the technology, based on our own numbers, based on what we know the system already does, based on 3 years worth of production, we're cost effective. And all we've got to do is be able to demonstrate over a year or 2 year production cycle that we hit the numbers that we know we can do. And if we hit those numbers, the commercial investment to scale this up will be easily forthcoming. But really, that's where the commercial folks are focused, is, who can do this? Who actually can show us the numbers? Who can show us the, where's the beef? So that's kind of where we are, and I think we've got a real leg up, specifically because of the science that's also supporting this effort.
Sees, there's a department, within the curriculum now that would be churning out people that could do this work and have this interest. And
Yeah. Richard Lawrence is running a program there. I've gotten calls from Nauset Regional High School from teachers there who would like to start a curriculum. I know Scott and Chris are really pumped up about doing whatever they can with, whether it's with some of the other colleges and universities or at the local school level, to try to involve and create curriculum and training programs so that people can be exposed to this, and maybe some youngsters who would get enchanted with the idea of becoming an algae farmer.
Have you talked to Bill Fisher over at Cape Tech?
No, I haven't.
You should, because they have an investment in solar and wind, and they also have a strong landscaping and an agricultural program, but one who could benefit from finding out more about it. He's the superintendent over at the Tech, and there's an obvious tie-in with his interest in developing more job opportunities for the kids who graduate from the Tech. Is Valerie Fox the one you're dealing with over at Nauset?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Val is someone that has expressed an interest in alternate energy over time, and she's a great gal, and I know that.
She's pretty excited about it.
I heard on Monday MBL is 125 years old this year, so it isn't the oldest institution.
Okay. With that, okay, Scott.
Well, let me just say that biomass production is sort of in my blood. Before coming to the MBL 7 years ago, I was a fish farmer for 15 years. I founded one of the largest recirculating fish farms, using recirculated water fish farms in western Massachusetts. It's still going. And we were producing nearly 1 million pounds of fish, hybrid striped bass, a year. So algae farming seems like, well, this sounds like devolution, right? It should be easy, like falling off a log. But there are a lot of facets to algae farming that are really exciting for the scientific community. You've probably heard that recently we've formed a consortium among the research institutions down there. And this is one project that is just galvanizing scientists with great passion and interest. On the left there is the center that I direct, the Marine Resources Center, one of 3 centers. We have a total of 5 principal investigators from all 3 centers at the MBL involved in this DOE application. There are 3 more centers at TUI. That's an example of the chemistry lab there, the marine chemistry lab, that have another 5 PIs that are all involved in this project. On the bottom left, you'll see our sort of prototype bioreactors. These are each 200-gallon 2 bioreactors for growing algae. And so we'll get to the next slide in a minute here. And on the bottom right is the product of the marine chemistry extraction of the oils from the algae. These happen to be the same algae species, but grown under different conditions. So you can see they have different coloration, which suggests they've got different oil qualities. And Chris, who are you doing that? Is this?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So I mean, we have world-class, unique facilities where we have controlled seawater systems in our building, dedicated microalgae culture facilities. That's been ongoing for the last 5 years because we feed algae to shellfish. I mean, it's a typical hatchery operation as well, but we're getting much more sophisticated about it. I'll show you a picture in a minute of our field lab, which is all ready to go. It's been used for algae wastewater experiments for some time now, but it's perfect for mimicking the MMR site while this project is getting up and going. And then I showed you pictures of our advanced marine chemistry lab at DOE, and we have all the most modern molecular microscopy stuff. I wanted to point out, while we have 10 PIs that are focused on this DOE project, for every PI, I expect that we'll have 2 or 3 technicians. That we may have 30 more researchers in the WHOI MBL community as a result of this DOE project. So it's a huge economic generator for the research community too. I don't need to go into this in much detail. This sort of just summarizes what Kurt and Bob have probably said about the not just the technological excitement about this, but the social impacts too. Finding a beneficial use for sewage and CO2 and sunlight to produce biodiesel. So in summary, this is sort of our research plan boiled down. Research plan for algae to energy, ATE. We're in the process of screening local algal strains, those strains that are locally adapted to relatively lower light levels, cooler water temperatures. Our principal research competitors are all based in San Diego area. They're looking at algae species that are polar opposite of what we're looking at.
Really?
They want high light intensity, that they don't get burned out, because that's a problem actually. Algae in the desert can be overexposed and literally fry at high temperature. But we know, based on marine chemistry, that the algae that produce the highest quality oils are actually cold water algae. You think about why are krill so prolific in the Arctic Ocean? They're eating algae. Why do most marine mammals sequester all that blubber in the high latitudes? Because of all the oils that essentially derive from algae. So we're looking at optimum ways of growing and producing high oil within algae cells in the pilot ponds and bioreactors. And we'll be taking a very sophisticated genomic approach to try to improve those strains. Not genetic selection, genetic selection rather than genetic manipulation. We're not going to work with transgenic algae, but we'll be able to, once we find a strain that looks like it has the qualities we want, we can then fingerprint the biological mechanisms that are behind that, and then use that as a screen for other strains and species. Next one.
I guess I have if I'm hearing this right, are there strains of this that offer some problem as far as development, or you're looking for something that's resistant to attack?
It's what we're looking for is not any single strain. We're actually looking to create a community of algae, because we know historically from agriculture and having been in the fish farming business for a long time, trying to grow one strain of something and keep everything else out creates its own set of problems. You have one bit of contamination, particularly with algae, and the whole thing can go wonky. So we're trying to create a robust community. But
so your manipulation is to create that resistance,
right?
Okay. And then provide some diversity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Healthy, robust, and the other thing is it's also got to produce oil. So we're of the tens of thousands of species out there, trying to focus on the ones that grow relatively quickly, produce relatively high amounts of oil, and as a community and as a family have robust resistance to bacteria, to viruses, to other algae invaders that are healthy and natural in there, and therefore are sustainable and create a long-term healthy production system.
I think people need to hear that, because otherwise they'd assume that the algae that's in their backyard is stuff that they can harvest and sell.
Right. Yeah, the balancing act will be this relatively high growth versus relatively high lipid. They usually compensate for each other. And we're going to be looking for something in the middle that is robust and stable and can grow without.
And then Scott will turn them into Olympic athletes.
Our chemistry partners, and I can't say enough about our lead there at WHOI, Chris Reddy, who's already done a lot of the characterization of oils and biodiesels and their impacts on the environment. But now he's looking at how to identify the best types of oils that come from a variety of different algae strains. And they can be refined to either the jet fuels or the biodiesels that might have the highest use, depending on the collection of species.
We're going through a lot of cleanup at the military reservation because of dumping of jet fuel. Is it possible that dumping this stuff would not be intrusive at all?
My
question. The funny thing was, the guy who runs the sewage treatment plant there, Dewey, we've met with folks at the treatment plant before. He said, boy, if you had a spill of this stuff, I would have had none of the problems that I had when we had those jet fuel spills. Because this stuff all naturally degrades. It's completely biodegradable.
Right.
It doesn't attack or hurt the enzyme processes that he uses to break down sewage. So in answer to your question, this would have been a lot better.
Oh, yeah. That's the first thing that occurred to me.
One of the other, and the final point that Chris and his lab can uniquely do is certify, as carbon credits become marketable, being able to certify the origin of the CO2 that you use to grow that algae, and identifying that it came from a fossil fuel source rather than just from the atmosphere, will be critical in certifying that this biodiesel product you have qualifies for carbon credits and could make it more.
We're looking at that as potential commercial spin-off.
One more picture. This is the inside of the field lab greenhouse that we have. It's a past incarnation as a fish farm, fish growing on the right side, and algae treatment of the wastewater on the left side. But we're retrofitting this in anticipation of our award from DOE to start a pilot research project based on this algae with biodiesel.
Okay, excellent.
And one of the things that we're actually trying to do is basically replicate a complete process at MBL and HUI that will be the sort of the R&D center for continued support to the pilot facility. So the pilot facility is just a lot larger than what this is, but with all the capability to, for example, try a different nutrient combination or a different stress cycle or change something that produces an oil more toward the quality that we're trying to achieve. And they can do it on a small scale and call up and say, oh, why don't you change this, this, and this? But we're getting some great results with that. So actually, because of the fast cycle of algae, which is only 3 weeks from basically to maturity, it's very much faster than traditional crops. You also have the ability to kind of fine-tune what you get out of the system on a much shorter term basis. So that's one of the other kind of wonkish but very powerful capabilities that algae provide, as opposed to a number of other solutions.
Scott, what is the funding source that you're using now for the work you're doing on this? Do you have any?
No.
No?
We have a little bit of money left over from. We had a fellow from Egypt come and help us work on this project this summer, and there's a little bit of unspent supply money. So that's basically what I'm running on ether right now.
Right. So you need that. You need that grant.
What are some of the? Are there any side effect issues that we should be concerned about?
From
you're painting a good picture. It sounds very exciting. It all goes together. But are there any side effects?
Negative consequences.
Negative consequences. I'm going to say unintended, but because you're not intending anything bad. But are there any negative consequences of this activity? Is there any issues with regard to residue or effect on the environment, things of that sort? Because I don't think there's anybody with the Cape Cod Commissioners, who has a capacity to analyze this. I think we're going on faith pretty much, aren't we, as far as
well,
the DOE and MBL is
yeah, and with the Department of Energy and with EPA, I mean they've all kind of looked at this very, very closely. But in terms of I think the real challenge is going to be a land use impact issue. Really that's the key.
I guess that's where we come in.
Yeah, I mean that's really the toughest thing, because everything else makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about 100 to 200 acres of something which does have trucking, to and from the facility to pick up material and distribute it, just like oil's being distributed now. I mean, there's all those real-world impacts that still exist. I mean, we're not solving all the problems, but we're certainly trying to take a big bite out of some of the big ones.
And not to mention the area at the base that's been identified is also a Class 3 wind area. So it's also, we're looking at it for commercial development of commercial scale wind. We don't, at this point, conceptually see these two as being consistent and inconsistent use of that land. I don't see that the algae production over a number of acres and a commercial scale wind farm to be mutually exclusive. I think we could probably do them on one piece of property.
Oh yeah, because I think we haven't explored the potential of applying wind machines on cranberry bogs, for example.
Yeah, these would be the commercial scale wind to produce power for the base, not to support the operations power here. But we don't see them conceptually as inconsistent. There may be some regulatory hurdles to get over, but I think we can be helpful in that regard.
Yeah, and from an algae operation standpoint, a wind turbine in the middle of some ponds is not a problem.
Right. Sounds good.
So they're very compatible.
Okay, Pat, you have
Well,
questions?
no, I've asked.
Okay,
But I have one more. Who are you working with at the base? Do you have?
General Sellers is basically the person who's in charge, but headquarters, Massachusetts headquarters, have reviewed and weighed in support of the project, and so we've got actually a letter from the National Guard in support of the project. Mass Development, Paul Worcester, has been very actively involved, who was the former base commander.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
So, you know, Paul's just terrific, absolutely terrific.
So is this area you're looking at part of Camp Edwards, or is it some other section of the base?
It's in the Edwards section.
In the Edwards section?
Yeah, the rest is the wildlife refuge, right?
No.
Well, the northern part.
Yeah.
The northern 15,000. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make sure that that we have as little impact as possible, but while trying to maximize the economics of potentially being able to have access to Morant's, pollution source, stack gases, and then also waste. That would be the nutrient sources.
Yeah, the initial discussions were to look for 5 acres, and there was some initial discussions with Merit about co-locating there because of the proximity to CO2. Because we thought the base was going to be difficult to deal with, so we had simultaneous sort of dual-track discussions, and it wound up that the base was a lot easier to deal with than Merit.
Right.
To have that sort of leasehold out there is a pretty incredible thing to get that done in the time frame that we were talking about. So that, when they say the stars, the sun, and the moon lined up, they really did.
Yeah.
But there is some existing infrastructure over there, some piping infrastructure between the plant basically and the base, and I mean the possibilities here to use sort of wastewater generated on the base, CO2 sequestration, or maybe hot water, or whatever it is, the heat from the Merit plant is the really exciting part from a land use strategy.
And this is sort of tying in with them being able to. Isn't there an issue with Marant that with their cooling towers? I mean, it doesn't sort of.
Yeah, Marant is under an EPA order now to build cooling towers, evaporative cooling towers, just like 3 Mile Island.
Right.
And
Which
so
would be
they
a
have
beautiful
to,
site coming over the bridge.
They have to figure that out. So we're working with Marant on that. Additionally, Marant has to make some big strategic decisions about, as we do on the Cape, as how we're going to supply ourselves with energy. Is it going to be the investment in a very expensive new transmission line, or are we going to change the kind of fuels that we burn at Marant and how we use that plant? Some very big discussions that are going on there.
3 Mile Island is a deer park as you go into it, so
Yeah,
they
to
sort of offset
soften.
Yeah, works great.
In terms of the various benchmarks that you need to meet, what is the timeline for any actual completion of or getting the project underway?
Well, we're hoping to hear from DOE very soon.
Yeah, the DOE, excuse me, Kurt, because we heard yesterday.
Breaking news.
A very generic email that went out to all applicants. It basically said the merit review is underway now and will be completed in October. And they will be notifying applicants, successful applicants, that they want to come in and negotiate the awards by mid-November.
Now, I also know that there was a meeting that we had, Paul and Nagy and myself, with Ian Bowles, and he sounded very excited about this whole thing. And then you met with him afterwards. Yeah, what happened?
The administration has taken a position on biofuels that doesn't really include algae.
Right. Okay.
We're on our own.
Well, that's
again
on their path. And the one final. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just to add though, to clarify, I mean, there's a biofuels industry effort. Basically, the DOER took the position that the only thing that would qualify for the biofuels mandate would be waste vegetable oil.
From like
French fries.
Yeah, from like McDonald's and stuff.
And it's hard to justify the reasoning for that. But suffice it to say that they're continuing to look at the issue. Their concern is that EPA hasn't looked at second and third generation biofuels and come up with the carbon dioxide reduction numbers for those other fuels. This is one that they're totally comfortable with. We're engaged in a discussion where I think at the end of the day they're going to, they've privately told me that as far as anything to do with algae, they're totally supportive. We just need to see that come out in the regulations.
Right. And my final question is: the last 2 days, I've been as I'm getting ready to go out the door or driving down the road, somebody in the shale natural gas business has got quite a PR horn out there, because they're really pushing. There's lots of discussion about them all of a sudden discovering natural gas if you bust up shale. So this is going to be the new fuel for the region, and you can just see these people at work that it's the oil industry basically behind this, because they just can't let go. It seems to me that's what it sounds like. So they're finding a new way, and
we talked
how
about
can
that
we?
a little
Okay,
earlier.
yeah.
There's
So
some of the news, the latest news.
yeah, so that's
Again, I think that when Friedman says in a recent column that I read that we're all wimps with regard to this thing, we have to get unwimped
right.
and start working on stuff that right now there's enormous capital
And be
investment
real.
again for shale and extracting the material from shale. It's the same problem that they have up in southern Canada, where they have all of this oil shale, and they're not talking about the amount of energy that it takes to extract that let's say that usable BTU content fuel out of that. Whereas what you're presenting here, if it's all true and it all happens, is a hell of a lot less intrusive of the environment and a lot easier to extract. So I think that we have to go with what looks to be usable and move ahead.
Well, this is also renewable. I mean, the thing about a shale resource or any resource like that, even if it can be done cost effectively, it's a limited resource.
Exactly.
And China and India are still knocking on the door of what do we do.
Right.
So, I think I think this is clearly it has a lot of advantages, and we're just excited. I mean, I think this is really a coup for the Cape.
We have to reduce our dependence upon imported oil, and I view the Cape as an island. I came here working for a company that did front-end feasibility stuff for USAID, and the big thing was to take care of Cold War client states to avoid, to improve their energy independence. And this looks like an opportunity that's moving in that direction. I applaud you for moving forward on it, and I'm glad that we're part of it.
Yes, I am. I'm very happy about that too. So it's exciting, and it's amazing. It was about 3.
When are you going to start delivering over to the bus or over to the RTA?
Oh, yeah, Pat had asked that before. We hope to be in complete construction by, say, mid summer to late summer next year, and hopefully be in production by early fall. Okay. It'll take us about another 6 months of ramp up before we start to get up to full production levels. But just to give you a sense of the timing, that's sort of the timing that we're looking at.
And I can assure you that the RTA is going to be very favorably disposed towards using this stuff.
Well, the town of Falmouth will be forwarding its nutrient management plan, draft nutrient management plan to the state, probably October, November. And part of that plan includes a wastewater facility at the base, because they've been very positive about that. So that's good. So
that's great.
This will help support that decision on that plan going forward, I think, very much.
That would be great. Anything else from anyone?
It was great. Thank you.
It was great. I'm glad that the other commissioners have finally had a chance to hear all of this. I mean, we've been sort of going around now for about 2 or 3 years, and so this is great.
Now, you were mentioning that you were going to be doing something on the Lower Cape or having some sort of energy forum.
Well,
I wanted to mention that because there's so much focus now on nutrient management on the Upper Cape, and also this whole concept of having the regional wastewater treatment plant there. If it were possible, and I think it is, to get to all the 4 boards of selectmen on the Upper Cape together with a great audience and have you make this presentation, because I think the boards are signing on to this this intermunicipal agreement as a draft or as a non-binding. But to hear something like this, I think would help propel them in the right direction. So if you would be willing to do that, I'd like to work with you on setting up a date to
Sure,
do that.
absolutely.
Would you be the point person on this?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing that I could say in that regard as well would be, to the extent that you're interested in that kind of a regionalization effort, that clearly has a lot of advantages.
Right.
You know, it would. I'm sure DOE would be very interested to hear some of that as far as a spinoff. You know, we're looking at doing this. This project would also help in this regard.
If I can say, you know, this, you know, when Kurt came to me at first, it was at a 4th of July parade, and he was telling me all about this, and, you know, did I know Congressman Delahunt, this sort of thing. And, you know, I didn't know what he was talking about, but it sounded good. And, I mean, it sounded like it made a lot of sense. And that's where we went forward. And then I introduced him. I was attending these roundtables, yeah. But the forum that we had included the Cape Light Compact. We just did an energy forum on the Cape. And we as a regional government, we are doing lots of initiatives in this regard with the Cape and Vineyard Cooperative. And we're supporting this, and the commission is behind these efforts.
Not for nothing. We just got on appeal.
Excuse me, Bill, if I could just finish saying this. That this was this turned out to be a very, very good forum. So it was. I think that type of thing could be duplicated as well if you can. You know, it's also a very good thing for the county as well.
My focus, possibly I think we should discuss it, because the focus is really the nutrient management plan for one town, but the whole Upper Cape, and more to keep it more focused on that than at this point, because there are specific timelines that we have to meet in terms of that. So I don't know, but we can think about that, and I'll talk to some of the people back at the ranch.
The point I was trying to make was that we did get direct access to CDBG grants from the feds for energy efficiency. We had been turned down, but we went on appeal. I think that we could use that as a monument to have direct access for things that are energy related. And perhaps that's something for Paul to take a look at, to see whether or not we can use this as a monument to build on, to get to have an energy connection.
Okay. By the way, Sheila, it's only a year ago last July. We've done a lot in a very short period of time.
Wow.
Think about it.
Wow. Yeah, it feels no, it really is amazing how that has happened.
It really is.
It does. I mean, there has been a lot of work. Okay, well, that's great. Well, congratulations, Kurt. I'm happy, and Bob has really been.
That's been a great team effort.
Right.
I think that's the remarkable thing, is getting everybody on the same page in a very expeditious way. I mean, I think that's just a real testament to what can be done. It
was exciting to be there that evening when it was that kickoff dinner, and how many people were saying that they were like, you know, that is you had said earlier, that this isn't what we really do, and this isn't what we want to do, and here they are all really. It's almost like a whole new focus for all of you. So it's great stuff.
What's in the vials?
Oh, these
are the vials. This is actually this is algae biodiesel, and this is actually algae oil. And the only difference is that when you make algae biodiesel, you take glycerin out of the algae oil, so it's got the right flow properties for burner tips and injectors and things like that. Right.
But you know, here.
These are souvenirs.
Open those up and Congressman Delahunt has one of these courtesy of Bob on his office desk in Washington.
Keep these here, so.
But open them up. I mean, it's kind of interesting what they smell like. That is, you know, Bill, you'd ask before what the downsides are, but when you smell this stuff, it's, you know, it's pretty innocuous.
Yeah, it is.
So there's actually a Cape company that could use this byproduct for denitrification.
Totally different.
Smells like olive oil.
So there could be full circle.
The biodiesel to me, or one of them smells kind of like the sense that I get when I'm standing next to the ocean. I mean, you almost get that smell, but that's actually why the ocean smells the way it does, is primarily because of the energy.
Is this supposed to be?
We'll talk about it later. Are we ready?
Yes, I think we are.
Thank you very much
Okay,
for your
thank
time.
you
I
very
really
much.
appreciate it.
I want to thank you, and I'm sure hopefully those at the Cape will maybe
Thanks, Paul,
listening.
for sitting in.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
It's great stuff. So, and thanks for getting here, Scott, and Bob, as always.
Yes,
all
sure.
your enthusiasm and yeah, we'll have a good time.
Yes.
So,
Colin Halverson would be thrilled
He
today,
would be.
wouldn't
He
he?
would.
Huh?
He really would be.
Yes.
Yeah.
our
We've done everything else.
okay, everything else.
So
Is there
unless
other
Mark-
business or?
Mark or Maggie probably have a couple other things
Yeah.
for us.
Paul, did you have anything else you wanted to talk to us about?
No. Do you want to talk about regionalization funds there?
Hey,
we're going,
thanks
going
again. Good to see you,
have a
Scott.
meeting set up.
Okay.
We talked about
'Cause
that.
we have new DLTA funds that will be available in January, and we have some residual, a little bit of money that's left. So we were thinking about having like a regionalization open house. You know, we would invite people to come and talk about that and inform them that there was going to be a new round in January.
Well, what we
That would be a
talked
good
about
thing.
earlier in the beginning of our meeting was, you know, the counties taking this lead on getting developed some models for regionalization, and obviously involving you. And we talked because we know of. We're looking at fire because we're already focusing on CMed to some degree, but also the Lower Cape is looking at some regionalization in fire stations, and I think the Upper
Station
Cape.
2 in East Harwich is now responding on mutual aid agreement, and Billy Flynn had some regionalization ideas for EMS as well.
Yeah, but I think based on the regionalization conference that we attended,
Yes.
looking at fire and then looking at
Right.
regionalized assessing services, which I think was there, there seems to be a track record for that in other parts of the country that we could draw on, so those might be two areas.
And Mark is going to be in touch with you and others so that we can set up a meeting within either a week or 2 weeks so that we can begin to focus on this and take some real steps in this regard.
The other thing I want to mention while Paul's here is I wasn't able to go, but there's this bond,
The economic development.
economic development bond program, recovery zone bond program. There's one for economic development. There's one for facilities. That's out there. That's some information I'm sure would be great. And there's a set aside based on the county's population of about 5 million and 8 million, one for the economic development bonds and one for facility bonds. And we could draw upon those, towns could draw upon those. Of course, it's a bond program, so it has to be repaid, but
It's what
maybe some
is there an interest forgiveness aspect to it?
for one of them, the feds pay 45% of the interest piece. For the other, it's a lower interest loan. So there may be some opportunities there that we can use.
Good.
Well, and we talked about the fact that there are some
Okay, Bobby, thank you for it. Take care.
retirements that we know are going to be coming, and we need to prepare for this.
Yeah, well, I've been
Okay.
doing presentations on retarement pieces anyway, so I'd be happy to do one for
Yeah,
you.
that's-
Probably should do one for the assembly as well.
I think
Yes.
so, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll read that.
I just have a couple of things. I'm actually going to defer that.
Right. No, no, no. I mean, when
If
you look
you
at
look-
it close, yeah, fast.
It's the hair.
Yeah, it's the hair.
This
And
is
the shape of the face. Yeah.
contract for the Reggie funds. I'm actually going to put that in there, Bill.
It's-
I think
it's
you're
her and,
probably
Kate
signing
Kirk.
part of it now. And so if you could sign that. I'm going to defer two things. I have two resolutions, which are transfers for the assembly, but we can do those in 2 weeks when the assembly is actually
sorry.
meeting.
Are
So
they
we'll
here
defer
today?
those.
Are they,
No.
today's
No,
not
they
the
won't
day.
meet until the...
First of
First week in October.
first week in October.
Thank you.
Okay, I was thinking to myself, gee.
And the only thing I wanted to do was bring you up to date on the Registry of Deeds revenues. For the year, we are 12% ahead of where we were last year.
Yes.
And that's the good news. And of course, the bad news is if you control that for kind of constant dollars prior to our increase, we're actually behind 5.4%.
Right.
Well, the
So
paper-
it just justifies
It has
the
it's
paper
not turned
has
around.
the first permit or the first step on foreclosures are up right now.
Although I heard statewide, I thought it said in the Globe today they were down.
Well, statewide they're down, but they're up here.
So yeah, I mean that's certainly evidence that the real estate market hasn't turned around down here yet. That's for sure. I just want to also let you know that we do not have a contract from the state for the jail funding for October 1st through 12/31. We don't know when that's going to happen. So they are on schedule to run out of money approximately mid-October at this point in time.
May I ask, so what you're saying is now that the state has taken it over, they haven't really finalized the paperwork?
Well, they haven't taken it over yet. They don't take it over until 1/1/10.
Right.
And so we're still under the same situation. They basically have passed a budget and a resolution that funded the sheriffs from July 1st through September 30th.
Right.
And they haven't taken that next step yet. So we're...
So do we have to alert someone to...
yeah, I'd say Senator Murray.
Yeah. And
Senate President Murray, and I will be calling Nate Mayo for another, and Senator O'Leary's for another reason, but I will mention this to him as well.
All right. Good. Thank you.
And we talked about the Recovery Zone Bond Program. I want to sit down with Paul and talk about maybe what we can do to... It's a bit of a short time frame. You have to issue the bonds by the end of calendar year 2010, so... We're on a short time frame, so we have to kind of get that going and advertise a little bit to see if there's some opportunities out there for that.
Excuse me, did I miss? Did you say that the Compassion Fund online was canceled?
I didn't say that. I was expecting Tom to be here.
Okay. And he didn't.
Okay,
so we didn't.
So we'll check on why he wasn't here. I don't know why he wasn't here.
The other thing I would like to bring up is... Cape Care has sent me a letter of endorsement from Congressman Delahunt. They would like us to write something similar to support their efforts. I will forward that letter, and I kind of already did a draft of it, so I
think we need to discuss that in more detail.
I do too. I mean, that's why I didn't.
It's the financing of it.
It's all the finance,
and I think
that's what they have. That's their dilemma. It's the concept basically that everyone is supporting, and we have done that before. But it's just another letter in their packet, as all of these endeavors appreciate.
Well, excuse me, but maybe if we have written a letter previously, do you remember if we did or not?
I don't believe we wrote a letter.
General letter of support.
No, we made a statement, I think.
Bill, this is the whole funding question.
But
that funding question is huge.
I feel very uncomfortable supporting something that said there was going to be a raise in the property tax.
Yeah, we've certainly had them in a number of times over the past few years.
We are not stakeholders in that. The towns are, and for us to tell the towns that we're in favor of them, using property tax for that, I think that's out of our jurisdiction. That's above our payroll.
I don't think we've ever gotten to a point where we've taken a position.
Okay, so maybe we might want to discuss that a little bit more.
Yeah,
in
maybe have it on the agenda or something.
We could, yes, I'll be happy to have them come in.
No, we don't need to. I don't know that we need to invite them. I think we just put it on as an administrative discussion.
We will schedule that.
And we need a letter to go to DOR, a formal letter requesting a audit. We happen to meet a financial review or department internal audit.
Yeah.
Well, remember I talked to, I can't think of his name.
Joe.
Not the other guy, Joe Markarian?
No, not him.
He says we need to have a letter, send a letter.
Yeah. And I thought I did.
He said it never came. Oh. Yeah, we spoke to him.
I told him what we wanted to do. Remember, I looked at this at the summer, and he said, well, it wasn't until after January.
Right. So if you could get that out to him quickly, because
it's not an audit. It's a
it's an internal review.
There's a word they have.
Yeah, there's an internal assessment. Isn't that it? A financial assessment or review or something like that.
I'll read
financial.
Yes, Paul.
Just two things. One is, could we put on the agenda maybe the discussion of the engineers' stipends, because we have to build Mass Highway. Though they come out of the transportation contract, so all of a sudden we'll be billing for less than we built in the past.
Right.
Just if we could discuss that next week, that would be good. And then I just want to mention that the SEDS process, we've been working with the EDC, so we've increased our capacity to deal with the implementation of that. We're going to be having a big meeting. I think it's October 17th. And I'll get back to you on what that date's going to be. But last week, IBM came down and they talked to me and Wyndham Northcross, as well as the Cape Cod Tech Council, about looking at designating the Cape as potentially as one of their centers for excellence. They just did it in Dubuque, Iowa, and they've done it. Most of the other areas that designated have been around the world. So it's that sort of smart grid technology that you've seen. So they've looked at the SEDS process, and they've looked at some of the energy projects and the wastewater projects, and even that 4-year specialized college. And they think that there might be a way that they might be able to partner with us to wrap some of that together, and so that we could make our transportation grid much smarter. And with the bridge fiasco, those kind of technologies are technologies that we need, and tie it into sort of power grid and renewable technology. So that fits in. We talked a lot about the biodiesel today, but it all is sort of fitting into this really progressive thing. And so IBM reached out to us.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But getting to the bridge, what have the transportation department over there come up with?
Well, we've come up with many suggestions. We've circulated internal memos, and we were at a meeting at the transportation building yesterday at 10 a.m. There's another meeting Thursday at 2 p.m. at the Sagamore Fire Station. And so we've been working with the Army Corps and Mass Highway to come up with different strategies. Some of the suggestions have been to close down the Exit 1 on-ramp. That has been resisted strongly by Bourne and Sandwich. Another suggestion was to open up the base to through traffic as an alternative route. That's off the table now, was resisted strongly by the general down there. We have been successful at negotiating better signage so that you don't go by Exit 2 before you figure out that there's going to be a problem on the bridge. And they have shown some flexibility in their hours of operation. So that's what I think we're going to finalize on Thursday, when they start, when they stop, and whether they can open up 3 lanes on the weekends. I mean, the good news is there really was no marked delay yesterday or over the weekend. So I think simply by people knowing that there's a significant issue with the Sagamore Bridge, they have adjusted their travel routes.
Right.
But we continue to work on that issue, and this will be a standing committee that will meet throughout the construction schedule.
Again, I just heard it on the news, so I don't know how reliable it is, but they were saying that at least for the next several weekends through Columbus Day weekend, they will open that 3rd lane because that was successful, and this is the shoulder month. Just anecdotal information. I went over it yesterday. I had a friend that went over earlier in the morning around 8 o'clock, and it took about 10 minutes. And I went over. I was approaching where the barrels start to, weave you down to one lane, and that was at 11:06. And I was on the other side of the bridge, and that was right about a mile from the bridge. And I was on the other side of the bridge at 11:13. Yeah, and there was no traffic in front of me. The minute I came down, it was like nobody.
Hours later, on in the beginning of the week, we missed that. We missed the appointment that we had.
I missed an appointment too.
I'm glad that's being addressed. I think that one of the things about restricting people from getting on, saying if you've got an odd number license plate, you don't get on until such and such an hour.
That suggestion hasn't come up. Yeah, that suggestion hasn't come up.
Who suggested that?
No, that's not going to happen.
There was a suggestion to at 3 times close down the Exit 1 on-ramp. That this, Bourne and Sandwich are not in favor of that. Public safety officials over there are resisting that. So, some of the things that could be quick fixes are going to have, consequences.
Well, if they had a cop at that, at that entrance, that would do a lot as far as moving traffic, because part of the problem is that people are merging at that point, and who's going to go first. So instead of the Stady being at the top of the hill, if he was down there, it would have made a big difference as far as moving traffic along.
Yeah.
And last I heard, they're responsible for traffic direction and traffic management.
Maybe that's an idea, Paul, is maybe a temporary light at that, where it's green for the main road 6. It's red on the on-ramp for a short period, period of time, and then it switches.
Yeah, there's the Exit 1 on-ramp is really sort of the issue that they didn't deal with in the flyover. That still creates backups leaving the Cape, and there was an opportunity to study what that might the effect on traffic might be by closing that down, but clearly the Sandwich and Bourne are not in favor of that. There's a subsequent suggestion that maybe we make it a high occupancy vehicle on ramp, and modify that. Some of that's still in discussion, but I'm not optimistic that that's going to be a solution.
If the cop just moved down instead of sitting with his hands in his belt, watching traffic, and was down there directing traffic, I think it would move traffic along a lot better.
Well, what happens, people try to be nice. So people on 6, which is backed up for 2 miles, let every other one in, but the trouble is people who are on the exit 1 on-ramp, that's the shortest way to get there. So
there's not, they're not part of the weave. And if people do weave, things go, very nicely.
Supposed to do.
Well,
they got to do it.
I agree. There was
2
police officers.
Do a fine job. But there are other ways that we could flag traffic and direct traffic. That's been discussed. There's obviously a financial component to that. But the state's engaged now. It has everybody's attention, and we're thankful for that. The notification of this work went out a year ago. So, but it's not one of those things you ever really pay attention to until you go and you get off and you're stuck in traffic and exit 5 and you're like, oh, I get this is the weekend they start to construct.
And when it stops and it starts up again in the spring, there's going to be the same outcry, because people will maybe hopefully they'll remember. It'll be short enough that they'll remember.
The situation on the bridge was significant enough that it got everybody's attention. So I think even the media outlets will be more responsive to us wanting to publicize upcoming construction on the bridge. So
okay, good.
That's good. And we have best management practices established for bridge construction that they are not adhering to because of the compressed schedule due to the stimulus funds that are paying for
the job. And so far they haven't found any significant structural damage that would make this a worse situation. Correct? To date.
I am not aware of any.
They haven't really done what I would call an intrusive analysis that determines the structural integrity of the bridge. What they've done is they've exposed part of the what I call the surface, the surface construct as far as the sidewalk goes, but they haven't looked at the underlayment of the bridge to take a look at the amount of fatigue that has occurred since 1933 when the thing was put up.
No, but it does point out. Not that we need reminding how important the bridges are and what a challenge it is dealing with the bridges. And, if not handled correctly, this could have an impact certainly on economic development. We would hope not more than one season. But it does point out to you that as much as Cape Cod Commission in the past has been rapped for being an impediment to economic development, I feel the Cape Cod Canal is more responsible.
I was talking to Bill Zammer the other day, and he was saying that suppliers, all the suppliers that are coming over the Cape are being delayed for such a long period of time that they're going to be surcharging, like restaurants for delivering food, and other places. It's going to cost them more because of the delays. And if this isn't corrected, and that's a huge economic impact.
It is, but I think we do want to. Be careful about promoting the hysteria about the bridges too. We have monitored the backup for the last week, and it really has not been the issue that it was when the initial weekend.
Right. Right. I sent, and actually I was going to forward it to all of you, and I should, because then I was thinking, something like this should maybe be on our website as far as what the county is doing and where we're at and what it is. And I had people in the Outer Cape, and it's interesting how there's so many people that are jumping up and down. A lot of these people don't even necessarily go over the bridge very often, but they're all concerned about it. And it was forwarded to me by the chamber down in Wellfleet. So I responded basically giving an update of that they had the letter from Wendy Northcross, the original sort of panic letter. So I said, all of these things are true, but these are the steps that have been taken. This is where we are. And these are the facts, which is this is a federally owned bridge, federally owned funds. We really don't have that much control. We weren't able to control from the very beginning, although we're doing input and this sort of thing. And I basically was just trying to lay out that this is a temporary situation, that it is somewhat under control, and now that people are aware of it to try to do their travel accordingly.
And I would just like to thank Wendy Northcross and the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, they have done a great job. She is really come right out on us and was very aggressive and got a lot done.
Yeah, we all adapt to the situation, we know it. And it was better the second time we went over it. However, it just occurs to me that when we start to assign assets and resources that we have some control over, perhaps we should think about what serves the best interest of the people before what serves the best interest of the people that are, that are there.
Can I just mention what you mentioned, the engineer's stipend? When do you need to know? Because I know Maggie has approached Mark Morse of MMA Consulting. Yeah, so it would be useful to get that back from Mark before we have this discussion. But when is your billing drop dead date?
Yes, it's coming up pretty soon. I can get that from Gail, but I think within 2 weeks we'll get a bill done.
Okay, just let Gail, have Gail send me an email,
Okay.
and we'll try to push Mark to get that done.
All right.
So we'll have that.
Will do.
And why don't you send me your Cape Care
I will.
support letter? We can kind of put it in a draft format and use that as the
And-
basis of the
exactly,
discussion.
that would be great.
If we're comfortable
That
with that.
would be for next week.
And I only
Thank
have,
you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I only have one other thing that's personnel matter.
Okay.
So I would like to go into executive session.
I move that we move into executive session for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter and then not come back
No.
into public session.
I second.
Well,
Oh, yeah, aye. Okay, thank you.
Lions eye. Dirty. Roll call.
Thank you.
Not thought of.